What's going on, YouTube? Welcome. I got a good treat for you today. So just this morning, I was able to sit down or hop on an internet call with John DeSouza. Now, if you don't know who John DeSouza is, you're going to find out a little bit more in this interview, but he was a FBI investigator, a special agent for over 25 years, working various counter-terrorism and violent crime field work for the FBI. Now he has turned into a paranormal investigator because of some of the work he did in the FBI really made him start to question. You'll find out a little bit more about that in our discussion. And I first found out about John DeSouza earlier this summer through Jason Quit. Shout out, Jason. He was telling me about his relationship with John DeSouza and what they had gone through together, and it greatly made me respect this guy. So I did a little bit more research into finding out who he is. I added him on Facebook, watched some interviews of him, and I loved the dude. I love the way he speaks. I love the way his mind works, and he's able to break down certain situations, but also bring that logical, balanced perspective to metaphysics, to the paranormal, to an area of research that we need more logical deduction in. So that being said, I'm very excited to bring you this interview today. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll be seeing you guys soon. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Destroying the Illusion. I am Jordan Sather. It's Friday, October 20th, beautiful Friday, and I am absolutely delighted to have John DeSouza on with me today. If you don't know who John DeSouza is, he is an ex-special agent of the FBI. He was with the FBI for over 25 years, and during that time, he maintained a top-secret security clearance and worked in the Global War on Terrorism and Violent Crimes Division. And now John DeSouza is an avid researcher into the paranormal. He tries to get the truth out in any way, shape, or form he can, which is why I'm absolutely excited to have him here. How you doing, John?
Doing great, Jordan. Thanks for having me on here to destroy the illusion. It's cool stuff.
Absolutely, my friend. So, I mean, being in the FBI for 25 years, that's a long time. You probably did a lot of stuff there. So tell us about your time in the FBI and then how you became the paranormal researcher that you are.
Well, I was in the FBI. I was an attorney. I was a legal guy, a legal instructor. I was also a counterterrorism agent as well, working big cases, counterterrorism cases for many years. I worked a lot of high-profile cases and so forth. But in 2001, when the Twin Towers were attacked and the acts of terrorism that went forward there, we had an incident that affected me and many others that was called the Indigo Kids of 9/11. And what that was basically a bunch of little kids, ages from like 5 to all the way up to 12, dozens and dozens of cases of these little kids all over the country who were called in as leads as possibly connected to terrorism because they all had experiences of precognitive experiences of what happened on 9/11. And they all had dreams, visions. They drew arts and crafts. They had visions that they told adults about. And so once 9/11 happened, we had these kids were called in, not by their parents, but by caretakers. They were called in to these intelligence centers that were saying, call in anything at all that could be connected to this terrorist act. So we had to actually go out and interview these kids and ask them about their experiences. You know, one little boy, you can see it if you go on my Facebook, and there's a trailer there. One little boy drew this nice finger painting of 2 tall buildings, and teacher came over to him and said, wow, this tall buildings, these are very beautiful. You have the buildings are glowing and there's angels flying out of the buildings with red wings. And the little boy said, those aren't those buildings aren't glowing, they're on fire. And those aren't angels, those are people jumping out of the buildings, and they're on fire too.
Wow.
And so the teacher walked away from a child like that, didn't think more about it until 9/11 happened. And then she called it in as possibly connected to terrorism, so that FBI agents and officers had to go out and talk to these kids. Another little girl was on a playground just playing by herself, wasn't interacting with the other kids. The teaching assistant came over and asked her, "Are you okay?" She's just tracing designs in the dirt. And the little girl said, "I'm fine, I'm just thinking." And then the teacher goes to walk away, and the little girl pulls on her skirt violently and says, "Tomorrow, stay away from tall buildings, because tall buildings fall down, and sometimes they fall on people." And then the next day, 9/11 happened.
Wow. So all of these experiences were they're right before 9/11.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
And then you were exposed to that, and that kind of, I'm sure, blew your mind at that point.
It did, not just mine, but the dozens of other officers and FBI agents that had to also participate in these interviews. Because in every single case, there were dozens of these cases. And in every single case, it was found that kids were interviewed, the parents, the backgrounds were checked, and came back no connection to terrorism, of course. Like, it's not like these kids overheard some adults planning this terrorist act, and then nothing like that. So every single case, the paranormal explanation was the only explanation left in every case.
And how far into your FBI career did all of this take place?
This happened a few years into it, and that's the reason I wrote my first book, The Para Investigators. It was because of that experience and many others that occurred before that. But that was the most wide-ranging experience that affected not just me, but many, many other law enforcement officers as well.
And you wrote that book when you were in the FBI?
After I left.
After you left, gotcha.
Yes.
So then you were a little more open to speak about.
Yeah, and that was in 2013 when I left.
Gotcha. So in the 4 years since then, you've really, you wrote Paranormal Investigators. Now you have a new book, Clear Healers, out.
Clear Hearers.
Hearers.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry. Awesome. So yeah, you're really now trying to research as much as you can, get the truth out, and it's awesome to see. Speaking of 9/11 and terrorism, of course, we have the Las Vegas shooting that occurred just a couple weeks ago. Tell me your thoughts on that.
My thoughts on that is that there are numerous amount of questions that are not being answered that just make this appear like something's wrong here, like something's terribly, terribly wrong. And for myself personally, the number one question I have is, why on the first day of the investigation did the FBI make the announcement that there was no connection to terrorism or terrorist groups? Makes no sense at all when you do that on the very first day of the to make that official announcement, when it takes 10 days to examine the computers of the person who allegedly did this act. And he's got at least 2 homes. That means 2 home computers at least, plus other devices as well. There's got to be many other devices. And it takes 10 days to do the search strings and to search through those computers. And so why, and in order to prove whether or not there was a connection to terrorist groups or not. So why on earth on the first day would the FBI announce no connection to terrorist groups of any kind? Which now we're finding out that ISIS is actually providing evidence. I mean, at least data. They're showing data that shows this guy was connected to them and was recruited by them and working with them. So it doesn't make sense on any level. And that's the number one question I have. Also, and then of course, we also all know that all the witnesses are absolutely resolute and firm on that there were multiple shooters. Not just 2, but like multiple shooters in this incident. I've never seen a group of witnesses so resolute and so unified on that point. And yet there they are. It's amazing how that's happening. And so the questions that are being shown in this case it's just amazing that they are unanswered.
And due to the fact that we have the internet, there's so much evidence that's circulating so fast.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's like a new paradigm that they just can't avoid these questions. And there's so many of them. There's so many of them. There's the video that's circulating of the fire coming from the fourth floor, from
Mm.
the lower floor. And that has not been addressed, because saying that, oh no, that's a strobe light. That's it. Or, oh no, those windows don't open up. That's not answering. That's not answering the question. There has to be evidence provided, and they have to provide. And why in the world would they not provide the CCTVs of this guy carrying this 800 pounds of equipment into his, or somebody
Yeah.
carrying this 800 pounds of equipment into that room? Why wouldn't they? And the only witness that we have is somebody directly of the guy, supposedly, is of a security guard that was shot by somebody through a door, somebody he didn't see. And so there's just too many questions, and there's nothing being provided to answer any of those questions. And so we don't want to say it's a false flag, because the mass media has kind of corrupted that term. But I mean, it's looking more and more like there could be some staging. It could be a staged event, which means it's real. It happened, and people were killed tragically. People
Hmm.
were killed. But there's components of this. It's starting to look like it was artificially put together. That's what it looks like.
If it were staged, artificially put together, what would the reasoning be in your mind?
Well, I don't say the I word or NWO, but I use the term elite powers in control. And the elite powers control, referring to the bloodlines who control the central banks, who give the nations their marching orders every day. Uh, and whenever the elite powers in control do something, like do an operation, uh, it's never for just one purpose. There's always layers of purposes. So this guy over here is saying that it's being done to benefit this global corporation who wants to install security in all the casinos, and that's why it's being done. He can be right, but then this other person who says, well, it's obvious that it's being done for the global initiative of disarming the entire world, disarming the American public, and that's the reason it was done. These people and others as well. There can be all these purposes can be going forward at the same time. So I believe there are many purposes to it. But of course, probably the single most ancient purpose is global disarmament of civilians, and that's a big one. So when you see the usual suspects coming out and jumping on this for, I guess they call it gun control, but
Hmm.
it's not really gun control. It's disarmament of human beings to leave them defenseless. That's what it is, and that's what they're advocating for. And so that's always the top most important reason. But there would be other reasons as well.
Awesome. Awesome, my friend. So switching gears a little bit, we have the Las Vegas shooting that occurred, possibly for multiple reasons. We also have a lot of other things blowing up in the mainstream media in regards to disclosure, in regards to bringing forth various technologies and information that has been kept from us. So, for instance, Tom DeLonge and his To the Stars initiative. So, what could be these disclosures, in combination with this potential, we call it false flag or staged event? Kind of what do you see all of this fitting together for?
Well, I looked at the Tom DeLonge press conference,
Hmm.
because I was asked to do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have looked at it. But I actually went through it, and I made notes even, and I found it bewildering. I mean, absolutely bewildering. I saw I saw in there uh, the DeLong himself, I believe, is appears to be, because I watch his body language and his cadence and how he talks, and he was the only one who was able to talk without a teleprompter. If you notice, to that
Mm.
to that vast empty theater that they were doing they were doing the staged event at. And he appears to me to be forthright, sincere individual in the things that he believes. But that rogues gallery behind him of like, they were like the who's who of agencies that do not work trying to disclose things to the American people. Quite the opposite. And especially the offices that they held, these were like high officials in the CIA, in the DOD, in the Secretary of Defense. I mean, these were not the people who were working to bring information and openness to the American people at all. And these were mostly the people that, when I was an FBI agent, I was a field agent. I was what's called a street agent, investigator. And these were the guys that me and other field agents would avoid like the plague, because they were not out there working for helping the American people access to information at all. So I was kind of puzzled by him bringing out these guys as being the gold standard of what. I don't know. It was just completely perplexing to me. It didn't seem to fit, except that it appears that there's somebody else behind this entire operation, somebody on a much higher level who is behind this operation, and they picked these guys to stand up there with him. I mean, I was taking notes. I mean, there's a guy there from Aerospace Skunk Works. I mean, there's
Lockheed
Martin Skunk Works. I mean, it's pretty amazing. They said things like, we will be connecting the dots. Oh, this was Tom DeLonge said this. We will be connecting the dots. And yet a lot of it, he kept on saying about it was going to be entertainment. So it's just kind of schizophrenic as far as what they said was going to be. High officials from the black world. I mean, high officials from the black world is what he's really putting forward here. And some of these guys supposedly left their agencies just a few days ago, supposedly. Just a few days ago. So that means that they were in talks and being recruited and putting together this operation while they were still at their agency, at CIA, at DOD. So how could they have been doing that without their agencies being a part of this?
Yeah, it seems like an almost massive conflict of interest there.
Yeah, not only that, it seems like a massive possibility that their agencies are still involved in this operation. See, that's what it looks like to me, just from what I know. And they kept on saying that, and then the CIA official says this is going to be a commercial venture, but it's going to be an intellectual adventure. So, and again, he was reading teleprompters. They were all reading teleprompters except for Delonge and DeLonge. And some of these guys worked for the Senate Intel Committee. It was just unbelievable as far as that goes. And also, now, here's the worst part of it. The SEC filing is available. So this is an investment thing where investors can take their money and put it towards this company and buy common stock shares in this company. Well, all the paperwork is actually public, and I put up a really excellent research piece that was done by UFO group, ufology group on my Facebook. I sent it to you. I don't know if you.
Was it UFO Seekers?
Yes.
That effect?
Yes. It was, and it's on my Facebook. If anybody wants to go look at it right now, it's an excellent job of researching this SEC paperwork filing. It appears that it was set up with various corporations. This what's it called? To the Stars Academy. It was set up with various corporations so that DeLonge has the trust in his name, but he takes none of the liabilities if things go sideways with this thing. He takes none of the debt liability at all. And it's just very amazing the way that it's set up. Also, when the company was first formed, it took on $200,000 in liability, in debt right away. We don't know from what, and yet, but that $200,000 almost matches exactly the amount that is presently there, or it was when it started out, from supposedly from small investors.
I remember that because on their website they had a GoFundMe number, and I was very
Yeah, like
surprised. Their
where
first
did these
day,
yeah
it was
where did
nearly
these investors come
200,000.
from? Where did these investors come from? Who are they? That's amazing. How did they even hear about this
Mhm.
if they are truly small investors? Well, now you see on the debt sheet for the corporation, suddenly there's this $200,000 liabilities that matches almost perfectly the amount that appeared all of a sudden from investors on the GoFundMe that you just referred to. Amazing coincidence. Amazing coincidence.
Almost seems like it's kind of a fake grassroots effort in a way.
Ah,
Mm,
yes.
could very
So
well be.
So yeah, I mean, I'm just saying how it looks.
Mhm.
All I do is look at clues and then match up patterns, and that's what I see there. But what I'm getting right now is people are sending me information on who actually is behind DeLonge and this entire group, and it's pretty shocking. But I can't reveal any of that because I've only gotten one or two sources on it, and it's not corroborated on documentation yet.
Mm.
Yet. Uh, but yeah, it's going to be pretty shocking when people find out who's actually behind all this.
Yeah, and speaking of Lockheed, they're acting like Lockheed doesn't already have the technology. They need this large effort to, you know, gain funds to research and develop it. Yet
Yeah,
Ben Rich, former head of Skunkworks, was
yeah,
saying that they already had the technology to take ET home.
yeah. That's because this effort appears to me to be psychological. It's a
Mm.
psychological. It appears to be a psychological operation. What they want to put forward is not really the technology, because, like you said, technology is already out there.
Yeah.
What they want to put forward is psychological acceptance of the technology as, wow, look at us. We're really heroic here. We're heroic. We're working with this technology and we're going to put it forward.
Mhm.
It's going to be awesome. And look, we have a rock star standing out in front telling you how cool this is. Isn't this great? It's psychological. They're putting out something, they're putting that forward. That's the goal that they're trying to create here.
Good, very good point. And on one end, that's a good thing because that psychological acceptance, we need that in the mass public. But at the same time, what is their end goal? That's the big question.
Yeah, there's numerous different suggestions what the end goal is,
Hmm.
but my own personal opinion, I think really the great goal, just based on what I've seen, because there's so much fluff in everything that they're doing.
Hmm.
There's like 99% fluff, and you have to really, really penetrate with an investigator's eye to really examine, drill down, and see what is the real thing underneath here. And the only thing I can see of any substance here that appears to be a potential underlying the real agenda is weaponization, is acceptance of weaponization of outer space.
Hmm.
That's
Interesting.
that's the most substantive thing I can really see here. That, which I know is a permanent common agenda of the elite powers in control. It's something very, very important to them, along with their other top priorities. But one of their great priorities is weaponization of outer space, and I think this may actually be the soft face of that weaponization.
And that makes a whole lot of sense because when I was watching that live stream event as well, one of the presenters reading off his teleprompter was discussing Russia. He was kind of making a metaphor as to if the military now were faced with an adversary that was able to, move at thousands of miles an hour and dematerialize and whatnot, have this amazing advanced technology. He was almost pulling the Russia card and saying, well, we wouldn't want our enemies to have that. And he made reference to this back in the Soviet Union, the Cold War, the arms race then. So it looked as if they were psychologically building us up to say, oh, we do want that. We do want weapons in space or some kind of advanced platform as such to defend ourselves against, well, they were claiming Russia or making it seem like Russia in the press conference, but maybe later on they could move into the extraterrestrial card.
Yeah.
Yay, we need these for bigger threat.
And for your viewers who are probably a younger demographic than I'm accustomed to, let me just explain to them that one of the first great head of NASA was a guy named Wernher von Braun. And this idea of weaponization of outer space is not something I came up with. It's something I got from him, because he was a futurist and he was a great thinker, in addition to some of his negative things. But Wernher von Braun said he predicted that the United States will become embroiled in several fake wars in the future. And he said one of them was going to be the war on terrorism, where the entire Islamic world would be against the Western world. And he says these wars, these fake wars, are needed by the elite powers in control in order to keep everybody occupied, so they never look up and see what the real problem is. So he said one of those would be the global war on terror, where the entire world would be embroiled in this whole thing. Another one, of course, was going to be the Cold War, the war of the United States against the Soviet world. And that would go on for quite a while. And then he said the final great war would be a fake alien invasion, which would be used in order to weaponize all of outer space. And space travel is the same agenda as weaponization. It's all intertwined. And so that would be used to weaponize all of outer space. Why? Because those weapons would all be thrown up there. And we're talking about weapons that can use, of course, lasers, sonics, scalar technology, all kinds. Because in the final analysis, of course, the agenda of the elite powers in control is to take over all these weapons. And then instead of pointing them outward towards the alien invasion that's coming, it will be turned inward towards us. And exercise a level of dominance and control that was dreamed of, that was never dreamed of before by dictators. World dictators have lived in the past, in the 20th century. Imagine having the power to make an entire town evaporate, who's resisting the global will, the elite powers in control will, and not doing something they want. And that's the kind of power they will have. That's why weaponization of our space is so important.
Or even, get it as targeted as a single human being in a home or something to that effect.
Exactly.
And speaking of such, bringing these scalar technologies, directed energy weapon, that conversation to the picture, we're having these massive fires in California. These fires where many of them started seemingly overnight. There's very interesting pictures of melted metal, melted car parts, a lot of trees still standing around the area that supposedly got burned, plastic, which is resistant to microwaves. Plastic still stands in the middle of these, fires burning hot. So do you think that these outer space-based technologies, these weapons platforms, are already being used?
Well, I do believe this. I believe that the elite powers in control are using breakaway technology all the time, apparently now, more and more often. The stuff that that most publicly we first really became aware of during 9/11, when we saw steel girders reduced to powder, when we saw these things being done that a bunch of 12th century savages were not able to do. They did not do this. They were there, with box cutters and with dirty nightshirts on. No, they did not. They were there. The terrorists were real, and the terrorism is real. And those guys were there. But again, I believe that they were being used as patsies, and that 9/11 was accomplished with breakaway technology, that the nations are not allowed to have. And I believe that's what you're talking about there with the forest fires that have weird signatures that go on, things that can't be done with with our technology that we have currently out in the open. And yeah, I do believe that that's happening more and more.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't believe that the nations are allowed to have this technology directly themselves. For instance, what happened on 9/11, when you have these airplanes that are massive, that are driven with such precision, extraordinary precision, as to hit a target, in a jungle of buildings and towers, with such precision and on such hard angles that even a 20-year veteran pilot would have a hard time directing that airplane, hitting that precisely. And so, yeah, I believe all that was done with breakaway technology, and we're continuing to see that technology now. But I don't believe the nations have control of that, whether you're talking about the United States or others. They're not allowed to have it because they would use it on each other on a
Yeah,
massive scale.
we're discussing factions,
Right.
factions.
Right.
It's you kind of have to take the labels, the nationality out of the picture.
Yes.
It spans nations. It's more of like a quasi governmental corporate group,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So with how crazy things seem to be getting, we have Las Vegas, these semi-disclosure initiatives, these fires, storms, um, what do you foresee happening, and how fast do you foresee it happening to play a little speculation game here?
Well, if we're speculating, I'll have to say that I believe we may be looking at another, and this is difficult to say, but we may be looking at another mass shooting event in the next 60 days to 90 days, because this one just hasn't worked. It hasn't. I have never seen a narrative fall apart so quickly as it did with this particular mass shooting in Las Vegas. I mean, it's unbelievable how badly it fell apart and how it's continuing to create so many problems. Even though, of course, the mainstream media is so controlled, they won't touch it now. They won't say anything. But now that we have witnesses that are missing, and we have one that died under suspicious circumstances the other day. This 28-year-old girl who was going to organize the witnesses into some sort of organization to try to get to the truth of the Las Vegas shooting, and now she ends up dead. And of course, the security guard is effectively missing for all intents and purposes. He's refusing to do any interviews except for Ellen, the Ellen show. Ellen, of course, who has financial interests with MGM, who owns the Mandalay Bay Casino. So basically, I mean, this has just fallen apart so badly that they may need a do-over. That's what I'm thinking. They may need a do-over, which is why people need to be especially alert and very careful for the next 60 days, because they need something to try to make people to try to shake it off, and just come back with something else. So that's the most the scariest thing I speculate on for the near future.
And I have seen a lot of ads pop up just over the last few days of various active shooter drills and
I saw that.
crisis actors around the country. So just like you said, be very careful. If there's an event going on in the area, I would avoid it. And also just want to make a quick note, you said shooting in the next 60 to 90 days. Interesting piece of info that I saw a couple weeks ago was that the company GS4, the security company that the Orlando shooter had worked for, they recently took over security at the Viking Stadium in Minneapolis, where the Super Bowl is going to be held.
And so when is that?
That's in usually end of January.
Okay.
But they just took it over. So, I mean, even like sporting events could be something to be very careful at. So
absolutely, because this is a very real possibility, because I'm sure the pressure that they're feeling on this mass shooting in Vegas is just getting more and more, and it's not going to go away. It's only going to get worse.
You think it is going to get worse, though? You don't think that the Vegas could be the straw that breaks the camel's back?
Well, in terms of like shedding light on what kind of operation this really is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I hope so. That would be that would be great. But it's like I said, these things are done from a level that is so far above national government, and it's done the people who do these types of, if it is a staged event, the people who put these staged events together, I mean, they've been doing this for hundreds of years. They know how to cover their tracks. They know how to do these things to maximize their protection, and they know how to put national actors in the way to avoid any sort of possibility of finger pointing to them.
Hmm.
So and they're very good at it. I mean, just look at the whole campaign of 911 was an inside job. 911 was an inside job. You just put out some disinfo agents out there, pretend like they're the most anti-government people in the world, and then create a pithy slogan, and there you go. You've got a whole group, a whole movement that is permanently looking in the wrong place to blame who did this. They're looking at what? Like federal government. Well, they're never going to find the evidence on that. Why? Because federal government didn't do it. Federal government does not have the technology to do the things that were done on 911. They just don't
Hmm.
have it. They don't. Because if they did, they'd be using it like every week, every week overseas in Afghanistan and all the places that they're at war. See, so
Mm.
that's that's something that they're so good at, and that's why it's so hard to say, oh, this is going to be the one where they are going to be caught, where they're going to be shown. I mean, we've had we've had mass shootings where operators were actually caught in the woods by police, by the local sheriff, and put in handcuffs, and they were wearing camouflage, and they were detained. And then what happens? They get the phone call, and it says, let him go. He's not part of this, and don't keep his information. And they do that, and they do that. They're
Oh
gone,
man.
and then that's the end of it. As a matter of fact, the night of Las Vegas mass shooting, there were several people detained that were stopped as possibly being connected. And yet, what happened? They get the phone call, says, let them go. They're not a part of this. And that's what's done. And don't keep their information. And that's what happens. So that's why it's hard. It's hard, Jordan, to say, you know, yeah, this is going to be the one
Hmm.
where we're fine, because it's so easy to focus people on the old, oh, federal government did it. You know, they're the ones who did it. Uh, and so that stops all the real inquiry from going forward as to who really, really did
Yeah.
this.
Classic COINTELPRO counterintelligence
Exactly.
programs. So
Exactly.
thank you for bringing a very well balanced perspective into all of that, because I know with how emotionally driven so many people are by how more intense these events are getting,
Yeah.
that can kind of shut down critical thinking aspects of
Right.
the mind. So it's
Right.
very good to have those perspectives and those very grounded opinions. And lastly, I want to ask you about your book, Clear Hearers. What,
Yeah.
and I just want you to expound a little bit about that and what you wrote about in your new writing.
Oh, Clear Hearers is something that people have not seen before.
Yeah.
It's a book that is about my own paranormal experiences, uh, even as a child, even as a teenager, and it's a story of a great voice that comes to people, very clear voice of authority that comes to people during times of crisis, to help them, to uplift them, and sometimes to save their lives. And it's a book that talks about my experiences growing up in my family, and also the experiences of many, many other people who were clear hearers. It's based on clairaudience as well. That's another word for it, but I'm bringing back the English term for it. Clairaudience was a French word,
Mm.
based on Joan of Arc, who was the first globally known clear hearer. Joan of Arc, who used to say that she would hear the voice of Mother Mary. She said it was Mother Mary who would come to her and help her and show her her future and help her to save France, which is what she did. So it's that's what the book's about, and it's not like anything people have seen before. That's for sure.
That sounds amazing. You know, it's fantastic to see an ex FBI agent with such a grounded perspective be into the paranormal, but also keeping that balanced, logical perspective and investigative perspective. You know,
Yeah,
being able to see, well, there's layers of reasons for different things, and deduce and connect the dots as to all those layers.
absolutely. One of the things I like to do with people, because I'm constantly asked, okay, and I constantly get information on this one's a disinfo agent, this guy's a disinfo agent, who is a disinfo agent, who is not,
Mm-hmm.
and who's paid by the government. I have people send me receipts that show payments from CIA contractors to certain individuals, and I don't want to see any of that, because I will never tell people this guy's this guy's information is real, this guy's a disinfo agent. I'll never do that. What I try to do is teach them how to do that for themselves. I try to teach methodology. I do workshops. I try to teach people the way that the FBI does it, to evaluate informants, whistleblowers, anybody bringing information. And that's basically, it's called map the person and cuss the info. And map stands for motives, access, persona. Cuss, the information, stands for credibility, unbelievability, source, and survey. And that's what you do. You go through each of those items. And those are two separate tests. If a person passes one part of the test, that's all it takes for you to consider their information. And human nature is, if they pass on the personal level, you're going to give their information a really good looking at, and you're going to consider it very carefully. Or if their information passes the test, then you're going to give the person a chance to go through their stuff. So it's motives, map the person is motives. What are the motives? Access, and persona, assessment. What is that person like? Are they stable, reliable, consistent? And then you cuss the information. Is it credible? Credible material? Is it unbelievable or believable? The source, is it third hand, or is it documented hearsay? Or is this an original source? And then survey the material, see if it's from a singular source or various independent sources. So anyway, that's one of the things I try to do everywhere I go, is just teach people how to evaluate these whistleblowers and these informants themselves. Very important.
And that is absolutely important, and I absolutely respect that because we have to teach people how to think, not what to
Right.
think. So
Right.
if in this world is not so black and white, it's very gray. A person could not even know they might be handing along misinformation. They could be,
Right.
completely all intention for good, but they don't know the information's bad,
Yeah.
or some of it might be in quality info, some might be bad as well. So
Yeah.
it goes into such deeper layers than just saying, oh, they're not, everything's wrong what they say, or this
Exactly.
person,
And
can't trust them, because then
exactly. And
I'm very wary of people that deal in absolutes like that.
yeah. And people should stay away from mainstream media on all counts completely. Great joke going around saying I don't listen to CNN for the same reason I don't drink from my toilet.
That's awesome. Amazing having you on with me, John. I thank you for talking with me for this time today.
Oh, it's great, Jordan. Great being here with you and destroying the illusion.
Absolutely, my friend. So just real quick, where can people go to find you? We discussed your Clear Here's, your new book. Where can they find your work, find that, and
Well, all my books are available on Amazon and any book retailers where fine books are sold. Also, my website is johntamabooks.com. That's T like Tom, A M like Mary, A, johntamabooks.com. And people should just check out my Twitter, my Facebook as well. My Facebook has a lot of great material on it. And as well as my YouTube channel as well. And I'm trying to get this stuff out there and make people think about these topics that are so much more important than anything else out there.
much more important than anything on television that'll give you.
Exactly.
So
That's
for
it.
everybody watching, I'll go ahead and post all the links that John just offered down below this video for easy access. And again, thank you for coming on with me, John. Appreciate
Thanks, Jordan. It's been great, man. It's been great. Thanks so much.
it. All right, take care.